Well, as we heard in that report, Typhoon Haiyan left a trail of devastation across the Philippines, and 3 months on, rebuilding efforts are still going on in the worst-hit areas. So how can the region be more prepared to deal with weather events like this? Nick Finney is the Humanitarian Director for Emergencies in Asia with Save the Children. He's in Singapore. I'm also joined here in the studio by Rob Schofield, the Philippines Response Manager with the Tearfund charity, who's just returned from Tacloban. And welcome to both of you. Perhaps we should start with you, Rob, and ask, what sort of progress report can you give from Tacloban? What's it like there right now?
Well, I think I've been in this business for about 15 years, and I was shocked by what I saw in Tacloban. I just got back yesterday from the Philippines, and the scale of the devastation is huge. As you look around the city, houses completely destroyed. As you look up to the mountains, forests of coconut groves snapped in half. So the scale is enormous. The emergency effort, the distribution of clean water and food and basic tarpaulins, that's gone pretty well. And that's been a huge effort by the government, by national aid agencies, by churches, by the international community. But there is now this massive rebuilding effort that's required to get people back into their homes. More than 1 million people without a home.
Just as you talk, Rob, we're looking at pictures. Those are actually from November. That's the immediate aftermath of the disaster. How different do things look to what we're actually seeing?
I think what's different now is there is a sense of normality. And I think that was what was so striking for me about the Philippines, that people have got incredible initiative, that they're not waiting for someone to come and bring a hand out. They're trying to get on with it themselves. So there's rubble along the side of the streets in very orderly piles, but rather eerie piles of rubbish from people's homes. I saw, for example, this plastic baby at the top of this pile of rubbish, which was disconcerting. And people are starting to repair their homes, which is brilliant. But I met this one guy, Jadito, who proudly took me to his home that he'd repaired 5 days previously and moved in with his family, just with salvage materials. The problem is that home is now weak and very susceptible to the next typhoon. And you might know that just this last weekend there was a tropical storm in the Philippines, and high winds, flooding, and actually, that is really exacerbating the aid efforts with this ongoing stormy weather. And so Jatito, as I talked with him, I was so pleased that he had a home to live in, but also rather sad about the possibility that in the next typhoon season that home's going to fall down.
Nick Finney, I wonder, has what we saw with Typhoon Haiyan made you think any differently about future events like this and how on earth you deal with them?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question, and it's obviously a question that's at the forefront of our mind at the moment. For Save the Children, as we reach the end of the immediate response phase, we're trying to really refocus our efforts to ask why did this disaster happen, and could it have been prevented? And there's a lot of possibility, as has been said. People are recovering very quickly and are very resourceful, and we're starting to turn our attention to how children can be part of the solution. Children can pick up a lot in schools especially, and schools are beginning to be functional again. And they're an ideal place in which to get people ready for the next typhoon season. Typhoon Haiyan is an event that we have to see as potentially the shape of things to come in the Philippines. And what that means is we've got to upgrade the preparedness at all levels, and this is something that Save the Children's really trying to tune ourselves into as we get through this initial life-saving phase of the emergency response.
What do you mean, upgrade preparedness on all levels? What specifically can change?
Well, of course, the physical preparedness is an important aspect. The number of homes and schools and health facilities that were damaged or destroyed by this recent typhoon is astronomical, and some strengthening of those structures would go a long way to mitigate the impact from a future such typhoon. But I think more importantly, people themselves can be such a big part of the solution, and of course children represent the future of the Philippines, and for the country to be prepared, children need to be equipped with the right kind of knowledge and skills about what to do to be ready for a disaster. Some of our work in the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan has revealed that children were actually quite confused about the different terminology that was used as the warnings for the typhoon started to be announced. And this gives us really strong evidence that there's quite a lot still to do in terms of just getting people organised and ready, understanding what the risk is, knowing what to do, and when a disaster is on its way, and that's something that is very important for us in Save the Children.
Nick, Rob, do you tally with that word preparedness? And if you do, what, with the existing resources, should change? Or are you simply talking about charities and all NGOs having to raise an awful lot more money to make these enormous changes to the way things are done?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really fundamental point, and I completely agree with Nick that actually what Tearfund is talking about is a building back a better strategy across the board, and that needs to happen at every level, as has been said. So there are issues to do with government policy, and I know at the moment the government of the Philippines is saying that people can't build within 40 metres of the shoreline because that area is so vulnerable to these tidal surges, which are happening increasingly. But also the sorts of materials that people use to build their homes. If they use the local coconut lumber, for example, that will last 3 to 5 years. If they use imported timber, even though it's more expensive, it'll last 10 to 20 years. And there are some very simple building techniques that you can...
How can they afford these extra costs? I mean, if a government's very stretched already, we're talking about some of the poorest countries in the world, how do you give them the ability to do that?
And we know, for example, that the UN appeal for shelter for the Typhoon Haiyan has only been 20% funded to date. So it is expensive, but actually, is there any point in just doing a like-for-like rebuild? If you know that in the next typhoon season that home is going to blow down, surely you try and invest a little bit more to make people stronger in future. And because the poor are always more susceptible to these sorts of disasters, the poorest are the most vulnerable and disproportionately affected by these sorts of disasters.